I love you, Cleveland, and I love you, Ohio. And a very pleasant welcome to this week's show, Bonus Time with Drennan, on the Big Play Sports Network. Hi, I'm Bruce Drennan, along with Ryan Smith. How are you, partner?
Well, you know, Bruce, I'd be a little bit better if I was getting out of the cold, headed to Florida like you are, but I'm hanging in there. I'll hold down the fort, and I'll make sure we have a good holiday here in Cleveland, and I hope you have the same in Florida.
My beloved wife, Jackie, is actually sitting over yonder as we are all packed and raring to go. And I'm going to give you three guesses as to what was the most important item that was packed and, of course, precisely, carefully packed.
Okay, so is this show related or is this vacation related? In terms of, so like, you know what I mean? Because like an important thing to bring would be your headphones.
Right. I'm talking about my children now. My children.
Are they important?
My new Callaway Paradigm, my tailor-made putter, which I've been using very effectively, I might add, lately. No, we're looking forward to going down there and can hardly wait, actually. We're going to be in the Keys. And by the way, programming announcement, we will not be doing the show next week because it's Christmas week, and I guess most of the shows are going on hiatus from what I understand. But we will do our show 2 weeks from today. We'll tape our next program 2 weeks from today, which will be after the big bowl game. So today we're going to cover those big bowl games on the show and also, of course, keep you abreast on everything that's going on with the Browns, the NFL, latest in baseball, Cavs, and I'm even going to touch a bit upon the college basketball, which will now be getting into full swing after the first of the year with conference play. But the other thing I wanted to tell you about is that we, from down there, might be featuring some guests. I talked to Ryan before we came on the air today. And the other thing that I have always liked doing throughout all these years is covering the PGA Tour, which gets underway right after the first of the year from Kapalua, which I visited once. My wife and I were there for a vacation, and at that time, Kapalua, which is on Maui, the island of Maui, was the home of Hale Irwin. That was his home base, three-time U.S. Open champion. And that mountain course, they have an ocean course, which is the one the pros play. But believe me, the mountain course is much tougher. One of the toughest courses I've ever played. So that gets underway, and we will cover the PGA Tour here on the show. And we'll be featuring guests, especially with spring training there after, because I'm going to be down there for quite a while, Ryan. So we look forward to doing those programs from down there. I'll be on Zoom. Ryan is going to be my nurse and guiding me through very gently, delicately, Ryan.
I got you, Bruce. Don't worry.
To make sure that I don't screw up technically, which is very likely if I was doing it on my own, that's for sure. I want to get into the Browns first and foremost because the 20-17 victory should not have been that hard again. How many games this year have the Browns played that shouldn't have been as hard to attain a victory as they have been? What, about 5 now?
I would argue, if not more than 5, you know, and it just comes back to the same thing. When no matter how dominant your defense is, if you turn the ball over, you're going to put yourself out of games. I think it's been one game since our bye week. We know that was early, like week 5, just one game without a turnover. But luckily, we've had our generationally talented defense lead us to victories, and we know that's the theme of the season. And I know it's coming to an end soon. The playoffs are near, but that's going to be the key to success, as it always has been.
Now, I'm very sympathetic to the injuries on the offensive line, and especially with Bitonio going down and didn't return. So, I mean, 4 of the 5 guys on that offensive line. And as you heard me last week, I was very concerned about the edge rushing of Chicago. And give Chicago credit. They played a great defensive game. There's no question about it.
They did. Montez Sweat had definitely the best game of his season. And Bruce, I don't know if you saw this little tidbit on the broadcast, but Montez Sweat has a chance to be the only player in NFL history to lead 2 franchises in sacks in one season in the same year.
Yeah, I know. I did see that. Well, the Browns won the game despite Flacco throwing 3 picks and the Browns rushing for only 29 yards in that game. And we're a running team, even since Chubb got hurt. Amazing. it was obvious that the Browns missed our offensive lineman, which I just mentioned, especially when Bitonio got hurt. He couldn't return. But despite the picks, Flacco threw for 374 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, that's the most yardage he's thrown for since we picked him up. Thank God. Amari Cooper was targeted 8 times, had 4 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. And, of course, the big play for the touchdown down the sideline allowed the Browns to stage the comeback after falling behind 17-7, and everybody was really worried at that point of the game. David Njoku, again, was great, I thought, and has become Flacco's favorite target since Flacco's taken over. And Cedric Tillman, too. I thought Tillman had a really good game. The Browns' defense stepped up again. However, former Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields almost pulled off the miracle victory with that Hail Mary at the end. I remember when I first came to Cleveland, it was in the I came here in the spring of '78. I forget the exact year, but it was the early '80s. It might have been... Oh, gosh, I don't know if Sam was still the coach or if Schottenheimer had taken over. But we played a game in Minnesota where they threw a Hail Mary on the last play of the game and completed it to beat us, and it just was so shattering. That should have been completed by Chicago. It's unbelievable. He's lying on his back like this, and it comes right down and bounces off his belly, for goodness sakes. We get the interception on that was quite a bounce off his belly, too, to bounce up that high so we could get the interception. But I was petrified that Hail Mary was going to be successful. And, Ryan, it should have been for them. It should have been.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know where else Darnell Mooney wanted the ball, considering it was in his lap with basically his hands wrapped around it. But I guess the football gods were definitely on our side that day. And I think every fan in Cleveland that was watching that game was just like Coach Stefanski in the presser. He said, in that moment, I blacked out. And I feel like that's what we all did, because you're right. There was no reason he didn't catch that. And if he did, I don't kind of would have set us back. But, I mean... whatever. We got the win, and that's all that matters.
Now, with the victory, obviously, this victory makes us 9-5, and it's fantastic that we're in this position. But as I said, if we lose to Chicago, we don't deserve to make the playoffs, even with the injuries to the offensive line. But I really, was scared to death when I saw that they were beating us as they were by 10 points before the comeback was staged, and then let alone that ridiculous heart-palpitating play at the end of the game. But we did prevail, thank God. So now we're in a real advantageous position going into these last games of the season, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But so as we do here on the show, let me talk about all of our opponents within the division and take an overall look at the NFL. And Cincinnati's 27-24 victory in overtime was one of the best games of the season in the NFL. I think everybody has to admit that.
Yeah, it was, and I guess credit to Jake Browning and the Bengals, but man, I would have loved them to have them lose. I'm not sure, if they have enough magic to make the playoffs, but I mean, they keep winning, and until they do, I can't say anything.
Well, they came back from a 17-3 deficit in that game, and late in the third quarter, they were down by that much late in the third quarter, and Browning did it again. What a story he's been, as he led Cincinnati to 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns and a winning drive in overtime. Browning and Cincinnati have now won 3 in a row, and they now improved to 8-6. Who would have thought at the beginning of the season, the way they started off, and then with the injury to Burrow, Browning's 184 yards and 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter make him only the 4th quarterback in the last 2 years to throw for at least that many yards and two or more scores after 3 quarters.
Wow.
One of the touchdowns was a Browning pass to T. Higgins at the goal line, which in my opinion is one of the greatest plays I've ever seen in the National Football League, and I'm not exaggerating. I exaggerate for sarcastic purposes in my style on the air all these decades, but I am not exaggerating when I'm serious about sports in this regard. That's one of the greatest catches I have ever seen. And not just the catch, but the move Higgins made after the catch to twist and reach out and break that plane with the tip of the ball. Unbelievable. Pass was pretty good, too.
Yeah, no, Bruce, you're spot on. That play, when I was watching it live, I was amazed. Not only did he make the catch on the sideline, but the awareness you have to twist your body and extend your arm, like Stretch Armstrong past that pylon. I mean, it was everything you said and more.
What a devastating loss for Minnesota, too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And they have now lost 3 out of 4. And how about this? Browning used to be a Viking. And they cut him from their practice squad in 2021. Mullins, of course, took over and did a real good job, but I wonder if they have second thoughts about letting Browning go. But, amazingly, the Vikings are still alive over there in the NFC, Ryan.
They are, and I don't know how they are. I don't expect them to make it, but, I mean, that NFC is so top-heavy, right? And especially now we've seen the 49ers even extend that gap as they're the total class of the NFC. And then you have your, Eagles and
NFL.
Cowboys. Realistically, the NFL, you're absolutely right. But it's so top-heavy that those wild card teams there in the NFC, it's going to come down to week 18, no doubt about it.
Well, with that being said, let's talk about Baltimore. Because their 23-7 victory over Jacksonville clinches a playoff spot for the Ravens as Lamar Jackson ran for 97 yards. It is really amazing to me that he runs so much and he never gets hurt.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's the formula, and he's not a big guy by any means, right? But I guess he's just so agile. But it is impressive that he's yet to really sustain an injury from that style of play.
He threw for 171 yards and a touchdown, and Baltimore now is the number 1 seed in the AFC. Meanwhile, the Jaguars are still in first place in the AFC South, and their remaining schedule actually favors them holding on to it because they finish at Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay's alive in the NFC South, but they're beatable with Mayfield, even though Mayfield's having a pretty good year. They're beatable. They're home to Carolina, and then they're at Tennessee, a non-playoff team. So they're very much in the way of controlling their own destiny, if you will.
Yeah, not only are we going to be rooting for the Browns this weekend, but I know the Jacksonville Jaguars as well, they will be, because they need some help from us. If we can beat the Texans without C.J. Stroud, they'll be in the driver's seat.
Right. Now, Indianapolis doing a job on Pittsburgh, and I love that. Gardner Minshew threw 3 touchdown passes, and the Colts rushed for 170 yards against the so-called vaunted Pittsburgh defense. Indianapolis has now won 5 of 6 and are at 8-6, and they moved right into the thick of the wild card race for a playoff spot. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh's loss is now their 3rd in a row, and it drops them to 7-7, and they are now in serious jeopardy of making the playoffs. Yay! They jumped out of to a 13-0 lead in that game.
They did.
And only to see the Colts storm back with 30 unanswered points and shutting out the Steelers totally in the second half. But what is with, I saw this, Ryan, what is with these Indianapolis players? We're talking about cornerback Tony Brown and wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, suspended, I think, for the rest of the season from what I read. What's going on there? They did not reveal the reason why. Do we have any idea?
Bruce, I didn't even know that was a thing, if I'm being completely honest with you. I know that the safety for the Steelers, Demonte Kazi, got suspended for that hit, but I didn't realize there were other suspensions in that game.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Self-imposed by the Indianapolis team.
Wow.
So we shall see. But that division, too, you mentioned it earlier, Ryan, with Houston and Jacksonville and now Indianapolis right back in the thick of things. So stay tuned on that front. But I'm glad Pittsburgh lost. Detroit 42, Denver 17. Just when we thought that Detroit was falling apart, and just when we thought that Denver was in position to challenge Kansas City, particularly how good they looked against us and how well they've been playing of late with Russell Wilson and company, and Detroit puts 42 on the board against them.
Detroit is such a weird team. They've been the most pretender, then contender, then back to pretender to contender again team I feel in this year. And that comes with a new regime and Dan Campbell as they're getting things figured out. But, I mean, shout out Jared Goff. I believe he had 4 touchdowns, but they're one of those teams. They either show up and put out, like, go off, or they kind of just become a shell of themselves.
Well, Goff threw 5 touchdown passes in that game, and the Lions improved to 10-4, and they can clinch a playoff spot with help on Sunday. Detroit led 21-0 at halftime, and now at 7-7. Denver's path to the playoffs is seriously damaged, and they desperately need Kansas City to continue to lose. And I don't know if that's going to happen either. It's crunch time. Houston defeated Tennessee 19-16. Houston won this game with backup quarterback Case Keenum, and because Rookie of the Year candidate C.J. Stroud out with a concussion, and I believe he's still going to be out for our game come Sunday. Is that correct, Ryan? Is that the latest we've got out of Houston?
Yeah, so it's not confirmed yet that he's going to miss it, but there's reports that he's more than likely not going to pass that concussion protocol in time, so it's likely we'll be facing our old friend in Case Keenum.
Devin Singletary rushed for 121 yards in that game, and Keenum was 23 of 36 for 229 and a touchdown. Houston trailed at halftime 13-3. And Houston and Indy and Jacksonville are all at 8-6 in the AFC South, and Houston plays their last game at Indianapolis. Kansas City defeated New England 27-17. Mahomes had a big game, and they're now the number 3 seed. As I mentioned, Denver's loss was very crippling to them because they were in range. Now I think Kansas City will probably smell it these last couple of weeks and be right there. They're not going to. I don't think they're going to overtake Baltimore, obviously, but they're going to be right there in the playoffs again to defend their championship. San Francisco over the NFC made fast work of Arizona, 45-29, no contest. Purdy, 4 touchdowns, and McCaffrey rushed for 115 yards and 72 yards receiving. He rushed for 115 yards and scored a touchdown rushing. And on the receiving end, 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. What a player he is.
Yeah, my pick for MVP, Bruce, is CMC.
Yeah, you can make a case. No question about it. No question. Tampa Bay defeated Green Bay 34-20. Mayfield. I can hear some of the fans through the camera lens. Bring him back. We should have never got rid of him. 381 yards, though. It's nothing to sneeze at. 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, no.
By Mayfield.
Credit to Baker, man. And honestly, I'm super happy for him. I mean, I love that he's having a bounce-back season. I know he's about to be a father, so maybe it kind of calmed down some of the antics and stuff and made him really realize focus on football. But credit to him. You know, funny stat, I believe him and Joe Flacco were the top 2 passing yard leaders this last week. But it was good to see, and I don't like people that hate on Baker. I get he had his stuff here, but I'm happy to see him succeeding in another place.
You know, I'm going down to the Gulf Coast in Florida. I'm going to be on the Gulf side.
There you go. Golf with Baker.
A little further south than Tampa Bay, but I'm curious to see if he's doing commercials in the Tampa Stadium, calling it his house with that pirate ship and doing his imitation of the Buccaneer.
He just might.
But anyway, they're the number 4 seed because they're leading that ridiculously weak NFC South. And Green Bay now 6-8 and behind the 8 ball. And boy, after seeing them against Detroit on Thanksgiving Day and the game Love played, and I'm thinking, wow, look out for Green Bay. And then, you know, they allow this to happen. So I guess any given Sunday, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely a sour taste for Packer fans because you definitely want to end the year on a high note with your developing quarterback to make him really prove that he is the answer, the replacement for a Hall of Famer, Aaron Rodgers. But they really don't have that answer yet. I'm not sure they will this season.
LA Rams 28, Washington 20 at 7-7. The Rams are the 7th seed still, despite having that mediocre record. Buffalo defeated Dallas 31-10, and running back James Cook rushed for 179 yards with a TD and was on the receiving end of a touchdown pass from Josh Allen. as Buffalo kept alive their playoff hopes. Now, that, like Cincinnati, quite a story if indeed they can keep this up and qualify for the playoffs. And even, in Cincinnati's case, it's more extraordinary because if they do it, it's without Burrow. But Buffalo has, had Allen healthy all season long. But, Dallas, unbeatable at home, and they can't win on the road. At 8-6, Buffalo finishes with a trip to the LA Chargers, who finally got rid of Staley. That's our next game this weekend. And then they host New England and finish at Miami. So, they're really in a good position. But meanwhile, I'll tell you what, Dallas, as we said last week, Ryan, is this finally going to be their year? Or are they once again going to underachieve like they did all those years under Romo and so far under Prescott?
Well, you know what, Bruce? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And the Cowboys realistically don't have a chance at that home field advantage for the playoffs, so they're going to be in a real tough position. And I wouldn't expect much because they're kind of, in a sense, the Dolphins of the NFC, in the sense that, sure, we've seen them dominate at home. We've seen them put up numbers, explosive numbers, like 50-plus points. However, at the end of the day, they don't really have a marquee win over a true contending team, so it leaves you to question them. And in the playoffs, and I don't think they're going to get it done.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great comparison to Miami. Speaking of which, they defeated the New York Jets 30-0 to improve to 10-4, and they're the number 2 seed. However, they host Dallas this Sunday. They're at Baltimore. And then they host Buffalo.
Whew.
So what a story it'll be for Buffalo if they can pull it off, catch Miami, and overtake them for that divisional crown in the East, huh?
That would be nuts.
New Orleans defeated the New York Giants 24-6, and the Saints stay alive for winning a game that they are supposed to in that ridiculously weak South. I can't say it enough. Seattle defeated Philadelphia 20-17. Backup quarterback Drew Lock engineered a 10-play, 92-yard game-winning drive, capped off by a 29-yard touchdown pass to Jackson Smith and in Jigba. What a spectacular pass and catch that was, too.
It was, and credit Drew Lock, right? You're down the whole game, basically, and then you have to engineer this how was it, Bruce, 97 or 92?
92.
92-yard drive.
Within the 2-minute warning.
Yeah, credit to him, and it was good to see a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously popular here because he went to Ohio State, but it was good to see them, and it left more questions for the Eagles.
Yeah, and it also moved Seattle, who had entered the game as the number 9 seed in the NFC after that devastating loss to San Francisco, to 7-7 and up to the number 8 seed. So meanwhile, Philadelphia's loss drops them to 10-4 and out of first place in the NFC East. Amazing. It also knocks them down to the number 5 seed. However, the Eagles should move back up if they take care of business, because they conclude the regular season with 2 games against the hapless New York Giants and a home game against Arizona. So divisional for Dallas, they've got a tougher path, obviously. 2 of their remaining games are against playoff contenders Miami and Detroit. And then, no question, Seattle needs help, but they could win out, and they travel to Tennessee, hosting reeling Pittsburgh, and finish at Arizona. And that's doable for them.
Yeah.
That's doable. So it's going to be a fascinating concluding 3 weeks here in the NFL, no question about it. How are we injury-wise before we go to break, Ryan? Have you heard any? I know Bitonio was walking around yesterday in practice, so hopefully he'll be able to play. Have you heard anything else?
Yeah, thankfully, it seems like every week, there's been Kevin Stefanski coming to the podium. But thankfully this week, all it is, I believe, is really Joel Bitonio. And he's listed as day-to-day, as we know they always list these guys. I hope he plays because, again, that offensive line is so decimated. Wyatt Teller, the only original starter left on that line. Right. I think we'll find out later today. So as we're taping, we don't have an exact answer. But I'm assuming he's obviously probably not going to practice today. And something like back tightness, it's something you got to monitor through the week because you don't want to re-injure it. However, luckily, a guy like Joel Bitonio, a seasoned vet, you don't necessarily need a full week of practice to just throw him back out there if you can go.
Now, the most important question that I have to ask Ryan this week, have you finally observed what I've told you to observe? No, you haven't, have you? I see your look at him.
Oh, wrong shot. I'm so flustered. I just messed up my
Do
hair
what
and
you
my
were doing
hat.
before. Go ahead. What I'm talking about is the stupid props.
You know,
and
maybe
knew that's where I was-
maybe I don't notice it because I just don't even listen to them because there's a very small percentage of national broadcasters that I can even stomach to listen.
That's honest. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back, bonus time with Drennan, as we'll dive into the bowl games. Got a lot of tidbits and opinions for you in the upcoming bowl games. Again, programming-wise, we will not be with you next week because of the Christmas holiday. So our next taping of our show, bonus time with Drennan, will be 2 weeks from today. The bowl games will have been completed. So it's our job right now to give you our tidbits as far as the upcoming bowl games. And we will do so in a minute here on Big Play Sports Network. Now here is the risk that Browns had to take with bonus time with Drennan, Ryan Smith alongside, and the Big Play Network is presented by Tipico Sportsbook. Tipico Sportsbook app has your traditional bets like the money line spread, point totals, but also lock-in player props. Check out our Big Play boosts every single week to back your favorite Cleveland teams and athletes with the best odds in the state of Ohio. Get in the action, load up for football season using promo code BIGPLAY100 to get $100 of bets on us. Just bet $25 and we'll give you $100 bet credits. Bet with the Big Play crew all season long with the Tipico Sports Book. All right, now it's time to dive into all these bowl games. I was, again, being very facetious last week. Did you catch all those big games I told you
Bruce,
to catch?
you know I was locked in on the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Are you kidding me? I couldn't take my eyes
What
off
was the
it.
one, the famous Toastery Bowl, or has
They
that
get
yet to be
They get
played?
more ridiculous every year.
Unbelievable. I haven't missed a one of them. Yeah, right. But there are some games of interest that I think we all can agree upon. And obviously, one is coming up a week from today when Louisville takes on USC in San Diego. That's the Holiday Bowl. Problem is that Caleb Williams isn't going to play for Southern Cal for fear of injury, which I can understand in this day and age with the draft and all. But it takes away from what would have been, I think, Southern Cal being a slight favorite to now Louisville -6.5.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just a trend that's going to continue to buck more positive-wise, that just players are going to sit out because there's really no point in risking that. And we've already seen Caleb Williams, and now Drake May is going to sit out of his bowl, too. So the top two quarterbacks in this class are just going to sit, which really is expected.
Right. I still like Southern Cal plus the points. They're going to score. They're going to find a way to score points. And I don't know, maybe Louisville's got something to prove because the last two games were such embarrassing losses for them. Although I thought they played Florida State pretty tough, but they were up against a third string true freshman quarterback in Florida State. All right, next, the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, which is going to be Thursday, the 28th of this month after Christmas. And I think this is an interesting matchup, Oklahoma and Arizona. Arizona had a tremendous second half of the season. They're actually a 1-point favorite, but I like the Sooners in this one, Ryan. I really do. I think that they beat Texas. They're the only team to beat Texas. That's a noteworthy victory for them. They faltered a couple of times during the season to take them out of the playoff picture, but I'll take the Sooners in that game.
Yeah, and I mean, it is unfortunate that Dylan Gabriel, we know, isn't going to be in that because he is transferring to Oregon now, which was not a big surprise, but, you know, this whole transfer portal nonsense is kind of getting out of hand, in my opinion.
I'm going to address that here in a couple of minutes.
But, Bruce, I do like the Sooners as well with you.
Notre Dame plays Oregon State in the Tony the Tiger Bowl. That's Friday the 29th, and the Irish are a 10.5-point favorite, as they should be. I think Oregon State will keep this close for a while, but eventually I think Notre Dame will prevail. I'll give up the points and take the Irish. Harmon and company are a real good 3-loss team, the best in the country, in my opinion. The January 1st matchup in the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa has Wisconsin against LSU. Now, this is Big Ten versus Southeastern Conference. I like the Tigers here. They are giving up 10.5, but this is a rebuilding year for Fickle and company at Madison, so I'll take LSU. And then the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, which is also going to be on New Year's Day. And this is an interesting matchup. Iowa against Tennessee. Again, Big Ten versus Southeastern Conference. The Volunteers are a 7.5-point favorite, but I like Kurt Ferentz in bowl games. You give him a lot of points, and especially because he was annihilated by Michigan in the Big Ten championship, but he can't recruit with Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. There's no way. I like Iowa. I think Ferentz always prepares his team very admirably for bowl games. That takes us to some of the committee games, and let me first talk about our game a week from Friday, the Cotton Bowl in Arlington, which will have Missouri up against our Buckeyes, 6.5. Is Brown going to quarterback?
I don't know. I don't believe there's been an announcement yet. I believe it's clearly going to be either Devin Brown or Lincoln Kienholz to see what they have in the young kid, but I'm not totally sure. If I was a betting man, I'd probably guess Devin Brown.
Yeah, because that's he was beaten out by McCord to start the season, but I like the Buckeyes in that game, -6.5 against Mizzou, don't you?
I do as well.
I think too much talent.
I agree.
The only thing, are they going to be let down after the disappointing loss to Michigan? I think just the opposite. I think they're going to want to prove how talented indeed they are. The Peach Bowl is in Atlanta. Again, this is Big Ten versus Southeastern Conference. Ole Miss is getting 3.5 against Penn State. I can't pass up those points. I'm not a big Franklin fan, and
I don't think anybody is.
Yeah, Alar has got to prove to me he can throw the ball accurately downfield. We know Ole Miss can put up points, but this is a classic matchup. Great offense in Ole Miss against a very good defense in Penn State, but I'll take Ole Miss to prevail. I like offense over defense, especially as high octane offense as Ole Miss has. And remember, they're coming off a humiliating loss toward the end of the season. So I think Ole Miss has got more motivation in this game. We'll see. The Orange Bowl has got in Miami. We'll have Florida State against Georgia. There's a reason why Vegas has made Georgia a 13.5-point favorite. It was 14.5. Now, I think Rodemaker is going to be the quarterback for Florida State. He's healthy again after getting hurt, taking over for Jordan Travis. But I don't think there's any question that Georgia's the better team. I have, for one, said over and over, don't tell me that Georgia's not one of the top 4 teams in the country. And I think they're going to want to make a statement in this game. I don't care who's quarterbacking for Florida State. Any opinion?
I mean, it's just more of what you said and the fact that I like Georgia in this. And I'm honestly surprised it's not even a bit more than 14.
I agree.
And, I mean, it's just it does stink for Georgia fans. But listen, I'm not going to sit here and have sympathy for them. By no means am I doing that, but it does stink to be a back-to-back national championship. In the majority agree that you're one of the best 4 teams. You get snubbed if that's what you want to call it, and then you have to go end your season against a third-string quarterback.
Fiesta Bowls in Glendale, Arizona. Oregon, 14.5-point favorite against Liberty. I give Liberty all the credit in the world, but I got to go with Oregon. Here's another game in which you probably have a team in the Ducks that are going to want to make a statement and prove to the world that they were worthy of getting into that Final Four, even though they weren't because they lost those 2 games to Washington, I realize. But this is a very talented team with Knicks and company. I like the Ducks. That brings us to the 2 biggies, and first is the Rose Bowl in Pasadena with Michigan, a 1.5-point favorite over Alabama. Roll Tide.
We've been saying it, Bruce.
You're with me on that one. Washington and Texas in the Sugar Bowl. You know, I went back and forth on this one, Ryan, because nobody's giving Washington enough respect, and all they've done is gone undefeated. So they've got that motivation going for them. Obviously, Penix is a great quarterback, but so is Ewers. And Texas has the best signature win of any team in the country this year. Even though it was so early in the year, you just don't go in to Alabama and beat Saban handily like they did. So I'm going to go with the Horns there.
Yeah, I'm going with the Horns as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see Washington maybe have a backdoor cover, but I do believe in Quinn Ewers. And I am a little suspect of Penix, but he has proven all season long Washington has it. They just win games, so we'll see.
So we'll see what those four teams. Texas has won 4 national championships. In 70, they tied for it with Nebraska and Ohio State. Alabama's got 17. Unbelievable. Washington has 2. They tied and they got it. They won it in 1960, and then in 91 they tied. And then Michigan has 11, and most recently Lloyd Carr in 1997. Now, these ridiculously interesting bowl games played so far, I like to keep track of how the conferences do against one another in the bowls. So far, as of the recording of this show today, the Pac-12 is 1-1. UCLA won, California lost. The Big 12 is 1-0. That was Texas Tech's win. The Mountain West is 1-1. Conference USA is 2-1. The Sun Belt is 1-4. The MAC is 1-1. And the AAC is 1-0. Usually the SEC prevails. The Big Ten usually doesn't, although they've had a couple of good years on occasion. Now, before I move on, I found this to be really interesting. The SEC has announced their schedules for next year when they bring in Texas and Oklahoma. So I went through the schedules of some of these SEC teams. Get this. Alabama, early in the year, travels to Madison, Wisconsin to play Wisconsin.
Wow.
That'll be interesting. Fickle will have a year under his belt. He'll have another year of recruiting. He'll be very well coached. That team will be very well coached to prepare for Alabama. I think that will be a very interesting game.
And if you want to include this, maybe a little bit of spice, Fickle did lose to Bama when he brought the Bearcats to the college football playoff.
Oh, yeah, Cincy, your alma mater. Alabama plays Georgia in the regular season next year. That'll be a dandy. That's at Alabama, by the way. They're at LSU. They're at Oklahoma. And then they play Auburn. Georgia will play Clemson again. That's been kind of a tradition in the contract the last few years. They're at Alabama, as I mentioned. They're home against Auburn, and they're at Texas. That'll be an interesting game. Georgia at Austin against the Horns. Oklahoma at Auburn. Their traditional game, the Red River rivalry, Texas. And they host Alabama. Texas is at Ann Arbor early in the season against Michigan. Hello.
We'll see if Harbaugh's still there.
Oh, he won't be. He won't be. They're home to, or they play Oklahoma. That's always on a neutral site. And then they host Georgia. So I thought it was interesting to see those matchups in the SEC. Now, Kyle McCord's going to Syracuse. Must have realized in a trip to Lincoln, there's no nightlife. Syracuse isn't Broadway, but it's more than Lincoln, Nebraska. So he's going to Syracuse. Apparently, Brian, on a serious note, he has a relationship with some of the coaches on that staff because he's from the East, and some of the coaches on that staff he has a background with.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Now, Ryan touched on this earlier, and I did some research. He didn't know I did this research, by the way, but the portal. Are you for the portal? Are you for the NIL as we know it today? Go ahead.
I'm for the portal in a sense that I think that players should have a right to leave in the sense that coaches can do it freely. And if you buy into a program and a coach, it would be unfair to have you stuck there. However, I do think there needs to be limits and maybe a little bit of modification to it if we want to make it good, because it does seem like it's getting a bit out of hand.
Now, I put this list together yesterday, so the numbers may be slightly off because I put it together yesterday. Today I see that a couple of additions have been made. Ole Miss has 10 kids that are coming in from the portal for next year. Colorado, that's Deion Sanders, 15. That's more than any other college in the country. Louisville, 14. I guess they didn't watch their games, the last 2 games of the season.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about.
My goodness. Who was that? Kentucky. Before they lost to Florida State, that was Kentucky, I believe, that they got thrashed by. Arizona State, 13. TCU, 12. NC State, 8. South Carolina, 9. Texas Tech, 9. Notre Dame, 6. Washington, 5. Houston, 8. Kentucky, 5. Wisconsin, 6. Get them ready for Bama. Oklahoma, 5. Purdue, 8. Syracuse, 5. McCord being 1. SMU, 5. Vanderbilt, 6. Texas A&M, 5. Oregon, 4. Arkansas, 6. Mississippi State, 8. Ryan's alma mater, 7. That's Cincinnati. Cal, 5. Oregon State, 7. Southern Cal, 4. Florida, 3. Virginia, 5. UCLA, 3. Texas, 2. North Carolina, 3. Miami, 3. Georgia Tech, 6. Charlotte, 8. Charlotte.
Who's going to Charlotte?
Michigan State, 4. Indiana, 6. Tennessee, 2. Missouri, 2. Virginia Tech, 3. Boston College, 6. LSU, 2. Maryland, 3. Utah, 3. Minnesota, 4. BYU, 2. Wake Forest, 4. Kansas State, 2. Auburn, 2. UCF, 3. And Arizona, 3. That's 277 transfers as of yesterday. This morning, before I came in to record the show, now, here's something I wanted to point out until I realized this morning. Of all these schools and all these numbers that I've given you that kids are transferring to these schools, this represents the number of kids that are using the portal to transfer to these schools. Did you notice anything as I was going through them, Ryan?
I noticed a surprisingly high number of transfers to schools that I wouldn't rather really suspect would get a ton.
Did you notice anything else?
Is it to do with a certain conference?
No.
I might not have caught it, Bruce.
I didn't mention Michigan.
I did notice you didn't mention Ohio State. I did notice that.
I did not mention Ohio State. I did not mention Alabama. I did not mention Georgia. And I did not mention Penn State. Now, this morning, I learned that Alabama now has 1. L.T. Overton, a 6'5", 280-pound defensive lineman, is transferring to Alabama from Texas A&M. But isn't that amazing? Less notable, Illinois, nobody. Iowa, nobody. That really surprised me. Northwestern, no one. That's a tough academic school. Stanford, nobody. Rutgers just got 1 today. So, but isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. And I mean, you can look at certain teams like the Buckeyes and who knows, Gene Smith's going to not be the AD for much longer. And then the future of Ryan Day is kind of unclear. So you got to wonder if that's maybe to do something with it. But And also maybe just, the competition level's more stiff there, but I'm not sure.
All right, let's tie in the NIL. Did you hear that the boosters may come up with something like some ungodly figure like $10-13 million to persuade Harrison to stay for his senior year?
Why? Like, I mean,
the NIL, let's face it, I really have mixed emotions about this. The money that these football players are getting through the NIL, it's unbelievable. They're transferring like crazy. I don't have the transferring. It always bothered me that coaches have clauses in their contracts. They can go into a family's living room, persuade the family and the kid to come to a school, and then 2 months later they bolt because they have that out in their contract to go make more money at another school, where the kid's stuck, and the kid wouldn't have gone to that school if it wasn't because of that coach persuading him and his family. So I've always had a problem with that. But the NIL is another problem I have. And even though football, I realize, generates the most amount of money by far for all of the athletic programs in these colleges and universities, is there anybody besides the football players that are benefiting? And that's a minority of players when you look at the rosters of all these colleges. What about gymnastics, swimming, baseball, soccer, softball? All of these are Olympic events, Hockey. All of them Olympic events. Are these kids benefiting? Volleyball. No. So, I just, it's a mixed bag of emotions for me. You get it?
It's just we live in a very interesting age where a 18, 19, 20-year-old is able to go to a program like an Ohio State and say, you know what, hey, throw me $2 million, I'll come play quarterback for you. I get it. I'm all for athletes getting paid in college and the likeness of their names and stuff, but there's got to just be some type of regulation. But it's hard when anything to do with money. We know there's so many just contingencies about it. It's tough, and I don't like the state it's in, but I do have hope that we can kind of regulate it and make it better.
Bonus time with Drennan will conclude in a minute here on the Big Play Sports Network. Now here is the risk around Great to have you with us, Bruce Drennan, Ryan Smith. Bonus time with Drennan, Big Play Sports Network. Cavaliers Monday, a 135-130 winner in overtime. Mitchell with 37. And Merrill, 19 off the bench. Very good. Cavs outscored Houston 13-8 in the overtime period to match the second longest overtime winning streak in NBA history. Did you know that?
I didn't.
New Orleans has a record with 13 in a row from 06 to 08. But no Garland, no Mobley. And they're out, of course, still for quite a while. So instead, I've said ideally, optimistically, I thought the Cavs realistically could have the highest finished as the number 3 seed in the East. More realistically, 4. This drops them down a few notches, I think.
Yeah, it definitely does, and it's going to be a tough stretch. We're getting to the point in the season where we're going to have these guys step up, guys like George Niang, guys like Karis LeVert, guys who are coming out of the woodwork like a Sam Merrill, and that's going to be the test to find out if we're really a deep team or not. But it's going to stink, right? You lose two of your 3 best players for months this early in the season. It's a total dark cloud above our heads.
So the Cavs will host Utah tonight. They're 10-17, and we take a 15-12 record into the contest. Now, I wanted to touch upon college basketball because we're going to be swinging into conference play after the first of the year, and we've already had some interesting matchups. And Purdue is the number 1 team in the country. They have a 10-1 record as they are coming off their victory against Arizona, who was number 1, and their only loss was to Northwestern in overtime. Purdue, of course, with Eddie, is a fantastic prospect for the pros, and they're going to be interested. Maybe they can save face for the Big Ten after all of these years years of disappointment in the not winning a championship. It's been since Michigan State, Mateen Cleaves playing for Coach Izzo that they've won. Kansas is number 2. Again, Bill Self, one of the best coaches in the country, no question about it. He's got the Jayhawks at 10-1. Their only loss was to Marquette, who's a good team, 73-59 earlier this year. Houston's undefeated at 11-0. I remember the days where they were undefeated with Elvin Hayes. And then, of course, they got knocked off handily by Johnny Wooden's UCLA Bruins with Alcindor and company in the semi. That's going back a ways, Ryan. Number 4, Arizona. They're 8-1 following that loss to Purdue, which was a 92-84 final. UConn's number 5. The defending champs are 10-1. Their only loss was to Kansas in a defensive battle, 69-65. Marquette, I mentioned them earlier. They're 9-2. They lost to Purdue and to Wisconsin in a non-conference game. Oklahoma's 10-0, Big 12. Tennessee's 8-3. They lost to Purdue, Kansas, and North Carolina. No disgrace. Kentucky 8-2. They just beat North Carolina. They lost to Kansas earlier. And UNC Wilmington, 80-73. They lost that game. And Baylor's 9-1. They lost to Michigan State, 88-64. And we'll see if Izzo can pull Michigan State back into national attention, because he usually does, even when he takes some losses earlier in the year. But we'll be reporting more and more while I'm down in Florida on the college basketball scene. Any opinion there?
Just some things I thought of was, one, Purdue, let's not count on them. It just, I hate to say it, but I don't trust them one lick. And then Houston, it'll be interesting, right? Because they were the class of the American Athletic Conference last year. And then now they're moving into the Big 12, which is arguably that and the Big East, I would say, are maybe the 2 best conferences in college basketball. So it'll be interesting to see if they can hang during that long stretch of conference play.
Well, yeah, and Oklahoma is very good this year. They're also undefeated. So that's, and Kansas. So look out. All right, now on the baseball front, Tampa Bay traded Tyler Glass, now the rich get richer, and Marlon and Manuel Margot to the Dodgers for a very good relief pitcher in Pipiot and DeLuca. Kansas City signs free agent Hunter Renfroe, 1 year, $5.5 million. Last year with the LA Angels in Cincinnati, he had 233, 20 homers, 60 RBIs in 140 games. And Kansas City also signed starting pitcher Michael Wacha, $16 million, 32 years old now, with San Diego 3.22 ERA, with Boston 3.32 ERA. However, his previous 3 years, 5.11 ERA. I think the Guardians might have been interested in Wacha had they made a decision on whether they're going to trade Bieber or not. We still don't know. Vegas has given some odds. Listen to this. On Bieber being traded, they think it's a 70% chance that the Guardians will trade Bieber. Only a 15% chance that they'll trade Clase. Interesting. Houston's getting interest in Framber Valdez. And before we come to you 2 weeks from today, we will know who the Japanese phenomenal starting pitcher Yamamoto has signed with. Right now, the front runners, according to all reports, are either the New York Mets, the New York Yankees, or the Los Angeles Dodgers. What else is
Who would have thought?
Although we understand San Francisco, Boston, Toronto, and Philadelphia are also in the mix. I guess Bryce Harper made a case for Yamamoto to join Philadelphia. That'd be quite a rotation to join Wheeler and Nola. That's for sure. Well, one thing is for sure, I'm heading south. And Ryan is staying up here. So we will talk to you via Zoom from beautiful Florida for the next 3 months. And I'm looking forward to doing the show. 2 weeks from today will be our next show. Remember, we're off next week because of Christmas. So with that being said, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all of you. We will come your way 2 weeks from today. On behalf of Ryan Smith, my producer, I'm Bruce Drennan. You have a great couple of weeks, great holiday. Stay safe. We'll see you then. Until then, as always, and most importantly, you remember, I love you, Ohio. And I love you.